In Day of the Outlaw, Robert Ryan was emotionally and physically tested to his breaking point. Filmed in the freezing Oregon woods, Ryan gave a career-defining performance as the rough rancher Blaise Starrett. However, the actor was severely impacted by the demanding set conditions and personal obstacles. What initially appeared to be just another grim Western evolved into an unforgettable and transformative event. How did he lose everything because of this movie? Robert Ryan's life was full with excitement even before he became an actor. Ryan was born into a conservative Catholic household in 1909 in Chicago. He was never the type of child to do nothing. He never sat still. The dynamism and grit that would characterize his professional life were there in him. During his formative years, he acted as if he were on a mission, unsure of his place in the world but eager to do whatever it took to discover. And he gave it a go. Ranching and even lighting matches on a ship that traveled to exotic locations like Africa. There was a lot of perseverance, perspiration, and physical work involved. He received his schooling from the prestigious Ivy League institution Dartmouth College. If you imagine a library, you might see a lot of books and academics, but that wasn't Ryan's main concern. For all 4 of his years competing, he was unstoppable as the heavyweight champion. He could use it as a form of self-education and a release for his restless energy that studies just couldn't match. There was no straightforward or clear-cut way to live after college. His time away from the ring was filled with equally strenuous occupations. He was an employee of the WPA, a government initiative that sought to re-establish employment opportunities for Americans throughout the Great Depression. Ryan, like many others, had to make do with what he could find at that economically difficult period. A Montana ranch even awaited him. Getting his hands filthy and embracing a lifestyle that may have appeared quite different from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. The turning point came in 1937 when he decided to try his hand at acting. Ryan wasn't the type to back down from a challenge, so he took a risk. Paramount Pictures signed him by 1939. Although one may expect Ryan to become famous overnight after signing with a major company like Paramount, that was not the case. He made his acting debut in a boxing film. Not too far-fetched given his history. However, hardly one was impressed. 2 more supporting roles in westerns came his way from Paramount. Once again, the Texas Rangers and the Northwest Mounted Police ride. To see him in either film, you would need to narrow your focus. If you kept your eyes open, that is, he played a Mountie in one part and an unnamed citizen with a pencil-thin mustache in the other. It was just a beginning. Even with these little parts, Ryan had no intention of giving up. He was realistic about the fact that he wouldn't achieve overnight success in the Hollywood industry. He decided to take his abilities to Broadway in the hopes that he may finally break through. And to some extent it did. Even though he didn't become famous while in New York, he did meet influential people who could assist him advance in his career. Ryan had transferred to RKO Pictures, a company renowned for its noir and grittier films, by 1943. Beginning with his part as Fred Astaire's friend in The Sky's the Limit, his climb to prominence was consistent throughout his tenure there. He was able to demonstrate a little more of his versatility in this unique job. People began to take notice of him when he co-starred with Ginger Rogers in the film Tender Comrade. The film, which Ryan had directed by Edward Dmytryk, was a smashing success and his star power was officially skyrocketing. Things were getting hot in Hollywood when WWII stepped in. A large number of young guys Ryan's age joined the military. He was a member of the United States Marines from 1944 until 1945. Serving his country wasn't his only motivation. Additionally, he was able to meet Richard Brooks, a writer and director who would later play a pivotal role in Ryan's life and career, and develop friendships that would last a lifetime. Ryan also began painting during this time. A low-key pastime that, given his rough exterior, may have come as a surprise. Ryan got back into acting after the war, and he was cast in more meaningful parts this time. Playing opposite Randolph Scott in 1947's Trail Street was his first taste of the Western genre. The part, however, was understated. Alan Harper, the role he played, was a generous businessman who sided with Kansas farmers in their struggle against avaricious ranchers. This was a common tale back then. As Ryan portrays the heroic protagonist amidst a sea of difficulties. One thing was lacking, though. Ryan lacked the charisma and simplicity to play the stereotypical hero. Not in a Western, but that same year Ryan had his major breakthrough. It was in Crossfire, a film that Edward Dmytryk and I collaborated on again. The film was a noir thriller, and Ryan was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for his terrifying performance as an anti-Semitic murderer. Things went well with Crossfire, and it led Ryan to new opportunities, but they weren't always what he had envisioned. Despite his surprising depth and competence in villain parts, he was cast more frequently in mainstream films as a leading man. However, the Westerns continued to roll in. For the 1948 film Return of the Bad Men, he was paired with Randolph Scott again. After his stint as a good guy, Ryan decided to play the opposite side of the coin as the Sundance Kid. Billy the Kid, the Dalton brothers, and a whole host of other outlaws were cast in the film. Ryan, however, was the showstopper in his portrayal of Sundance. He was merciless, frigid, and strategic. In the brief 30 minutes he was on television, he killed an unarmed Indian, choked a blonde heroine, and shot his comrade in the back. It was ominous, terrifying, and completely engrossing. Now Ryan could finally shine as the archetypal Western villain. From that point on, Ryan was famous for playing characters who were undecided or vacillated between good and evil. He reverted to playing a rough but honorable person in his 1951 Western, Best of the Bad Men, which was a little of a setback. Despite its stellar cast, which included Robert Preston, Walter Brennan, and Bruce Cabot, the picture failed to distinguish Ryan from his previous work. Difficulty arose in the plot. In contrast to his more sinister parts, Ryan's portrayal as the good guy lacked bite. The next year, with his role in Horizons West, things really took off for him again. Ryan plays the villain Dan Hammond, whose goal in life is to amass an empire whatever of the cost, in this film directed by Bud Boetticher. With an intensity that eclipsed even James Arness and Rock Hudson, Ryan ruled the screen. Playing an ambitious but reckless character put him back where he belonged. Someone who was prepared to sacrifice loved ones in order to achieve his goals. It was about this period that Ryan transferred to MGM, where he landed two of his most famous Western roles. One was in 1953's The Naked Spur, in which he portrayed the role of Ben Vandergroot, a cunning bandit who was pursued by the character played by James Stewart. A high-stakes game of cat and mouse unfolded against the background of untamed mountains in the film. It was riveting, anxious, and Ryan gave a terrifying performance as Vandergroot. Every word he spoke carried an air of dread. His greatest Western, The Naked Spur, is debatable but not without merit. You may believe Robert Ryan's Western career was over with The Naked Spur. However, in 1959's Day of the Outlaw, Ryan revealed one more remarkable part that would forever alter his career and impact his life. Day of the Outlaw, directed by André de Toth, was a revolutionary Western. The story took place in the Wyoming icy wilderness and centered on a small community that was besieged by an outlaw gang headed by the frightening Burl Ives. As important as the performers were to the plot, the film's setting, biting cold and snowstorms, created an atmosphere of loneliness and hopelessness. Everything revolved around Ryan, who was portraying Blaise Starrett. The town's defender, a tough-as-nails rancher hell-bent on stopping the bandits. Ryan had never played a hero like Starrett. Although he played the role of the hero, he was far from amiable. Neither the upright marshal nor the heroic cowboy was him. Starrett had a steely, obstinate, and harsh exterior. Attempting to rescue the village was not driven by any noble sense of obligation on his part. He would resort to any means necessary to ensure his survival. Ryan embodied the role with such conviction that the audience could not tear their eyes away. His decisions were heavy and obvious. Even though he kept quiet, his thoughts were clearly racing as he plotted a way to save his people from the gang. The demonstration of unfiltered focus and subtle power was superb. Russell Harlan's black and white cinematography brought out every sharp line in the cold terrain, and the film was filmed wonderfully. The screen was almost permeated by the chill. The performers' expressions, particularly Ryan's, betrayed it. The mood, though, was Day of the Outlaws' true selling point. You could feel the tension in the air of the town. As the Outlaws seized control and Ryan Starrett became the unexpected leader of a community teetering on the brink of disaster, the air was thick with anxiety and doubt. Originally purchased by producer Buddy Adler to showcase Robert Wagner, the narrative was based on a 1955 novel by Lee Edwin Wells. After everything was finalized, though, Robert Ryan was clearly the only one who could have portrayed Starrett. Despite its tight and focused writing, Philip Yordan's script had its share of issues. The director, Yordan, came clean later on about how the budget was inadequate for the film he had envisioned. It was a remarkably low-budget Western, coming in at only $400,000. Many difficulties plagued the production. Director Andre Dutoth's personal problems occasionally impacted his decision-making while filming, and snowstorms further postponed production. Additionally, Ryan had to skip a week of filming due to his personal struggle with pneumonia. Day of the Outlaw triumphed over these obstacles, which would have destroyed a weaker film. Ryan overcame all odds to deliver a career-defining performance. His eyes betrayed his weariness. The exhaustion of a man who, when faced with overwhelming odds, chose not to give in. It wasn't merely acting. Ryan immersed himself in the role to an extent that resonated with audiences long after the film ended. Still, Ryan paid a price for the dramatic experience of filming Day of the Outlaw. His health was severely compromised due to the demanding shoot, extreme weather, and his disease. The stress was already high before Dutoth decided at the last minute to switch scenes from inside to faraway exteriors. Ryan was exhausted by the role's physical demands and the increasing pressure on set. Despite its genius, it was obvious that this film had driven him to despair. The scriptwriter Jordan thought about what the Day of the Outlaw would have been like with more time and money thereafter. Notwithstanding these caveats, the picture is generally considered to be among the most atmospheric and dramatic westerns of all time. And that is heavily dependent on Ryan's performance. Some critics lauded the picture for its atmosphere and suspense at its initial release, while others were turned off by its despondency. However, thanks to its enduring cult status and legendary performances, Day of the Outlaw has become a film that audiences can't get enough of. Robert Ryan's career took a turn for the better in the early 1960s. He dabbled with television, as did many other actors of the day. However, Ryan had little interest in committing to a series that would run for a long time. He never settled on a role and became proficient at it. Ryan wanted to avoid being stereotyped as a certain type of actor by doing anything he could to avoid playing the lead in a TV series. He once remarked, "Sure, I might make $1 million or $2 million in a series, but I'd finish up being Sidewinder Sam for the rest of my life nonetheless." He did have a few memorable TV appearances. In Screen Directors Playhouse, he made his television debut playing the role of Abraham Lincoln. He had cameo appearances in Western anthologies as well, appearing in episodes of Wagon Train and Zane Grey Theater. Ryan made it crystal clear in every one of these why he never wanted to be a series regular. In every scene he was a part of, he effortlessly stole the show from the other actors. That similar inflated sense of self-importance likely contributed to the failure of his 1961 follow-up Western, The Canadians. Burt Kennedy's film was a typical Mountie-centric Western, but it lacked the charisma of its American equivalents. Unfortunately, the film's slow pace betrayed Ryan's performance as a fierce Mountie. Ryan finally seemed disengaged, and the script was dull and uninteresting. It was as if he was aware the part wasn't worth his effort. His ennui shone through. The Canadians is, unsurprisingly, one of Ryan's least outstanding Westerns. In spite of this, Ryan made a triumphant return in 1966 with a supporting role in The Professionals, just as his Western career appeared to be winding down. Richard Brooks, his old friend and the film's director, portrayed a band of mercenaries sent to Mexico to free a hostage woman. Along with Lee Marvin, Burt Lancaster, and Woody Strode, Ryan performed the role of a horse specialist on the squad. Ryan may not have had the most prominent role, but his subtle acting was spot on for the ensemble. Although Marvin and Lancaster's more theatrical performances stole the show in the successful film, Ryan's understated power gave the ensemble a sense of stability. Hour of the Gun, directed by John Sturges and released the next year in 1967, was Ryan's second supporting role. The film's makers insisted that their tale of Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp following the OK. At best, the veracity of the historical accounts was cast in doubt. Ryan portrayed the grizzled rancher Ike Clanton, who squares off against James Garner's character Earp. Despite the story's lack of realism, Ryan delivered a convincing performance as Clanton. A villain who could have been one-dimensional without his customary ferocity, he gave the role substance. Neither the picture nor his performance were very noteworthy, and it was certainly not his finest Western. An appearance by Ryan in Custer of the West was brief and came shortly thereafter, a Western that failed to brighten his resume in his latter years. Long and, to be honest, boring, the film was directed by Robert Siodmak and starred Robert Shaw as the notorious General Custer. The part that Ryan portrayed, that of a deserter named Mulligan, was mostly incidental to the story. It seemed like Ryan was merely acting, not bringing the same intensity to his lines as usual. The screenplay was equally ineffective. The film was tedious to watch due to its lengthy running duration and meandering speech. By now, it was obvious that not every Western would be a hit. Even the legendary Robert Ryan couldn't help but make a couple of turkeys. A large number of Western film stars began making the journey to Spain in the late 1960s to participate in the burgeoning Italian Western subgenre. The pull also affected Ryan. A Minute to Pray, A Second to Die, released in 1968, featured his acting talents. An unsatisfactory spaghetti Western. Despite Ryan's performance as New Mexico Governor Lem Carter, the picture was forgettable and a significant departure from his previous successes in the genre. But just when you thought Ryan's days in Westerns were over, he secured a role that would go down in history: 1969's The Wild Bunch, directed by Sam Peckinpah. Ryan was well into his 60s by this point, and his performance took on a new dimension due to his advanced years. A band of elderly outlaws fought for survival in the Wild Bunch as society turned its backs on them. Dake Thornton, played by Ryan, is a bounty hunter who was once an outlaw and is now responsible for finding his old associates. He was a natural in that capacity. Hard, intricate, and laden with remorse. The entire picture revolved around middle-aged men who were past their prime and were fighting for acceptance in a society that didn't want them. Brilliant acting came from Ryan as Thornton, side by side with Hollywood greats like Ernest Borgnine and William Holden. The Wild Bunch, like every other film set, had its share of drama. There were rumors that Ryan and director Sam Peckinpah had an argument about billing, but in reality Ryan and the rest of the cast were probably just annoyed by Peckinpah's infamous antics on production. Legend has it that Peckinpah verbally abused members of the cast and crew. Among Ryan's objections was a threat to strike. The director Holden and Borgnine weren't far behind. Despite the drama that unfolded behind the scenes, The Wild Bunch was a masterwork, and Ryan's portrayal of Thornton brought even more weight to the film's profound ideas. Lawman, 1971, directed by Michael Winner, was Ryan's final appearance in the Western genre. His career was coming to a close. Despite having several A-list actors like Lee J. Cobb and Burt Lancaster, the picture failed to impress. This film failed to live up to Ryan's reputation as a master of the classic Western genre due to its poor writing and tacky 1970s vibe. Although his portrayal of a corrupt town marshal was adequate, the picture clearly fell short of his finest efforts. But Ryan still showed that he could deliver, even in a bad picture, by rising above the material. Ryan learned he had lymph gland cancer that could not be surgically removed by the time Lawman was released. His diagnosis didn't deter him from continuing to work with the same tenacity that had guided him throughout his life and profession. He reminisced on his life in one of his last interviews, saying, "I've had a good shot at life. He was born in July of 1973 and died in July of the same year, but his performances will go on forever, notably within the Western subgenre, which had profoundly impacted his professional trajectory. Whether he was playing a tragic hero or a sinister villain, Robert Ryan was a formidable actor. Despite the ups and downs of his Western career, he is now universally recognized as a legend of the genre. Although he suffered greatly on Day of the Outlaw, the film nevertheless showcases his acting chops. Brave, dedicated, and unlike everyone else,